Okay. Hello everyone. Good afternoon. So we'll be talking about what's new in Drupal 8 Multilingual and why it's awesome. Okay. A short bio about me. My name is Chakrapani. I go by Chakri. I'm from Bangalore, India. And I'm a Drupal architect at HIGLY Solutions. I've been working on Drupal since 2009. And I'm a lead organizer of Bangalore Drupal community. And we are hosting our first Drupal camp in Bangalore this Saturday. Okay. A little bit of overview on what we're going to talk about. So we'll be discussing about the language first installer and core multilingual modules. So what are the core multilingual modules that come with Drupal 8? And optional and translatable English, language detection options, and language visibility and filtering, transliteration, and improved translation UI. And also content and configuration translations, how it has changed in Drupal 8. So the language first installer. So it comes with a very advanced browser-based language detection. So if your browser has a language which is already set up, when you install your Drupal 8 instance, the installer is smart and pick up the language, and it by default it will pick the browser's language. Unless if you want to change and install in another language, you can just click the button and go ahead. And automated translation downloader. So if you are installing your Drupal 8 site in any language other than English, Drupal 8 automatically downloads all the translations. So at the second step of the installation, if your language is not English, all your translations are automatically downloaded and configured. And if the language is not English, English is completely removed. So you don't need to have English as a language. If you are building a site in Spanish, you don't need to have your base language as English. And if the language is a right to left, Drupal 8 has a complete RTL support from the step 1. So in the first step, if you choose a language which is Arabic, from the step 2, you will see the screens from right to left. So this is a language first installer. So if it's English by default. So if you actually choose any other language other than English, it will say that all the translations will be downloaded from Drupal translations. And English is removed as well. So if I choose Spanish, yeah, please.
So are we suggesting that if you choose Arabic,
yes,
that literally the next screen is going to be in Arabic?
Yes, like this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So that's why it's awesome.
Why is that mixed up with English now?
Yeah, so that means that the translations are not present for those words. So the translations are downloaded from locale.drupal.org, so where there are all the translations, but still there are few words which doesn't have complete translations for few languages. Yeah. So the words which doesn't have a translation will still appear in English. So those are the default English.
So is the community actively working on
Yes, it is.
So it could be that when this is officially launched, that will already be translated to Arabic.
Yes, that's one. And if it's not, and let's say you install your Drupal 8 site, and day after tomorrow somebody actually translates these, the next time when you run your cron, Drupal 8 automatically downloads it and translates it. You don't need to do anything. Yeah.
So with that sentence
Mhm.
there that's not translated, so is it that like the word install, like does it translate, can it translate the sentence, or can it does it only translate word by word?
Yeah, actually I think it should be word by word. I mean, basically it depends on how it's coming from the back end. So while writing your code, if it's entirely in the single T, it has to be a sentence.
Oh, okay.
So when you're writing your code, you if a text needs to be translatable, you need to put that in a T function. So if it's completely coming from a T function, it will be a sentence.
Right.
So in the translation UI, you will see whether it's a sentence or a word.
Well, that's a good point, because
Yes.
it's hard to imagine the word with is not already.
Right, exactly. And there'll be context as well. So in this context, probably it would be a sentence. Yeah.
So is there an administrative section where you could go translate that?
Yes, there is. We'll come to that. Yes. So, and if you see anything like this, if you actually do the translation in the community directly, so the others, when they download, they'll get that as well. It's like a module contribution. You could just go on translate a word as well. Yeah. So more core modules. So I was actually thinking to say less, but it's more. More is less. In Drupal 7, you need to have around 20 plus modules to actually install and configure a complete multilingual site. Now, Drupal 8 has 4 core modules, which actually gives the functionality of 20 plus D7 modules. So you no longer need all those 20 plus modules. And these are the 4 modules which are part of the Drupal 8 core, wherein the language is the base module which lifts the heavy weight. So all the other 3 modules, the configuration, translation, and content translation and interface translation, supports the language module, provides the UI and support to what actually the language module provides. We'll get into that. Yeah. So the language module is the base language services. So that does the actual heavy lifting. So all the 3 others are mostly UI related and support modules. Okay, simple language setup and optional English. So the language setup is very simple in Drupal 8. So you'll have a add remove language including English. So you could choose to have English or you could choose to remove English given that you have another default language. So in Drupal 7, even though if your site is in Spanish, you need to have English as a base language. You couldn't remove English completely. Now with Drupal 8, you can actually remove English completely. So in that case, even then, if there's no translation, the text will fall back to English. That's because our code is written in English. Yeah, but the language of that is not actually English.
And you showed the example already of that in the previous slide.
Yes, right. So yeah, and there's no more disabled languages. Either you can have a language or you can actually remove a language. You cannot have disabled languages. In D7, just a moment. Yeah, please.
Now, I was going to say, so if you took out Spanish, let's say, deleted it,
Okay.
removed it,
Okay.
you can put it back again as a language?
Yes, you can. Obviously. Oh, I was talking about yeah.
If you delete a language,
Mhm.
what about the translations that were already stored?
Okay, so I think so. If you're deleting it, they'll be deleted.
Okay.
So which means you no longer need that language. It's not something which actually you disable it. It's a deletion completely. But if you are worried about the translations, so we are talking about the automated translation downloads. The moment you enable the translation, you will automatically download the translations.
But
So
whatever the translations,
yeah,
which
the
delete,
custom translations, if you have done, you might lose them, right? So, but you could, Drupal 8 has a very like improved export and import functions, and you could actually track those translations with Git as well. We'll actually come to that where it's a deployable. The translations are actually deployable.
that's it.
Yeah, so you can actually, they will be actually in your Git, or I mean Git, so you can actually go back and get those translations. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, so you can't disable languages. Either you can add them or you can remove them. Okay, so this is the screen. If you see, Hindi is the default language over here. You will have only edit option for the default language. But you can actually remove the English because that's my secondary language. You can edit or delete the
And if
English.
it was a default when you first installed it, that's
Yeah, you just need to, yeah, either you could install it first or even after installation, you can move the order. It's a drag and drop. So you could just move English to the top. It will become the default language and Hindi will become optional.
so it's just it has a higher weight.
Yes, right, exactly. And this is how the edit screen of the language looks. It's very simple. All you need to do is, name of the language, code, and you need to define whether it's left to right or right to left. Okay. So when we are having a multilingual site, this is most important. So we have very highly flexible detection options. So while any user comes to the site, user or admin or anybody comes to the site, and your site has multiple languages, you could actually have these rules configured based on URL or session. All these these are the weights on which the current language of the session will be defined. So if somebody comes to the site on the current page, so Drupal actually based on these rules, it will check which language to show. If you actually put session on top of the URL, so it will actually check for the session variable. If there is a session variable saying language and based on the code, so it will actually display that in that particular language. And if you actually see, this is user interface text language detection. So in Drupal 8, we have a additional configuration, similar configuration for content as well. So you can have a different rule set for user interface as well as a different rule set for content as well. Okay, yeah. So this is content language detection. So user interface is something, let's say when you are adding a form or something, all the names of the fields, all those things. So those will be the user interface, and the content will be the what user will actually input. So you could define if you need to have a different rule set for content as well as user interface. And a couple of interesting facts here is, if you actually see the third rule, it says user, follow the user's language preference. So it has a advanced options where you can actually configure user's preferred language and administrative language as well. So you can actually configure, if the user is an admin, show the site in a different language. And you could actually put that on top of the URL, so that if he is an admin, so that will be the first rule that will be triggered, and that particular language will be shown to the admin. And if he is not the admin, it will go to the URL checking. So based on the URL, it will display different language again. And another one is like selected language. So by default in Drupal 7, the selected language is nothing but a default language. But in Drupal 8, we have an additional option. Along with the default language, you can actually choose the selected language directly in the configure setting. So you can actually say that even though if your site's default language is Spanish, you can have the selected language as something else, English as well. So you don't need to go back and change the default language, which actually changes a lot of other things. Like when you are adding a content, it will be added in the default language. So when you want to add content, let's say you need to add that in English, but when a user comes to the site, you want the default language to be Spanish. So you could use this option. Yeah. So these are the configurations for each of those criteria. So this is the URL prefix, which was similar to Drupal 7. And this is a, okay. This is a browser language detection configuration. You can actually configure what are the codes of the languages. If the browser provides that particular code, you can actually define which language Drupal picks up. So these are the default W3C standard language codes. But if you like, if there is a browser which actually outputs some new code or something, you can actually configure that based on that.
So Chinese Mandarin in this case?
Yes, right. So they have, I think, multiple Chinese versions over there.
I forgot to ask at the beginning, so how many languages does the .org cover?
Drupal.org right now covers approximately around 95 languages.
95.
Yes. I think it's 94 precisely, but
And this
yeah.
is all done by the community by volunteers?
Yes, right. Yeah, so this is the session language negotiation. So you can also configure which is the session keyword which the Drupal checks for the language code. So limitless language assignment and extensible special languages. There are special languages in Drupal. If you have worked with a multilingual site in Drupal 7, you would have seen language neutral. It's actually a special language, which means that it's sometimes it's that a language is not applicable. Sometimes it's that currently it's not available. So you could actually assign the language later on. So not everything can have a language. There could be some things which need not have a language. So in Drupal 8, we have a very extensive special languages. Language neutral, as I said. So not applicable or not specified are two default special languages. You won't see them in the admin interface by default. That's to avoid the confusion. But you will have not applicable and not specified as the two default special languages, and you can extend them with your contrib modules if you need more special languages.
Can you give me an example of something we might see on the back end that might be flagged?
Okay, so it's not visible in the backend for the reasons of to avoid the confusion actually. So if you need to extend this, you need to extend via contributed modules. So this is used in the cases where you have a content type, and at this point you don't and you are creating a content. At this point you don't know which language it will be, but you are sure that there will be a language going forward. So then you will choose not specified. But not applicable is something which you will never have a language to that content. It will be same for all the languages.
Okay.
Yes.
It's going to be consistent across.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So there's no confusion between not applicable and not specified, because they're treated differently. Not specified is something which, when gets the language, it will be only shown in that particular language. Yeah. So contrib modules can add languages like these. You can create views in any language. So in Drupal 7, even though if your site is in Spanish, you need to create your view in actually English and then translate it to Spanish. You no longer need to do that. Views does support translations, and you can actually create your view in whichever language your site is in. Yeah.
So can you have an English language site and decide to make a Spanish language view?
Yes, but you need to have the Spanish language enabled for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll have all the options of the languages which you have enabled. All the languages. Yeah. Okay. So the content entities with bundles are more flexible. So in Drupal 7, you have content type settings for language features. You need to go back to the content type and then enable the translatable, and then come back and translate. And for each of the content type, you need to go back to the edit page of the content type and then enable and then come back. And that too with contrib modules.
I'm sorry, a question about, related to the question you asked
Mhm.
about views. Maybe you already explained this, maybe just one passing. So if, as a English speaking person,
Mm-hmm.
I create a view,
Right.
and the site is going to be marketed to 10 languages. I don't need to know those languages. I just, because I can convert it to Spanish, Mandarin, or any other language with the confidence
Yes.
being translated,
Yes.
but I don't, because as I create the view and QC it, I'm assured that the view is working just as it was working with the English version.
Yes, that's correct. Given that, see, in a view, you'll be outputting content.
Yeah.
Given that your content is translated and you have the content in that particular language, that view will work. So if you have the same view in Spanish and English,
Your content, it provides things for the Drupal system. And so you would have to send it out to your own translators too. And there's some other modules that are kind of aiding that process of how you organize all of this. Sending out.
But so when I convert English, when I convert my view to Spanish, for example, the view as a function is working.
yes.
It's translated. But so I know, but in order to know that from a quality perspective, that's where I need to bring in.
So
No,
the Drupal specific
Yeah.
things that relate to the Drupal system are translated. The content is not.
The content.
Yes, content, you need to have content in that particular language.
Okay.
Yes.
Like the pager, I get a lot of them in pager.
Right. And that's in Spanish. So got it. Okay.
So Drupal 8 expands it to all entity types and bundles. So which includes comments, users, taxonomy terms, nodes, menus, and custom blocks. All can be translatable. And the best part, this is the best part I like, central configuration screen for all these entity types. In one screen, you could choose to decide which content types, which taxonomy you need translatable, and in each of the content types, you can choose which fields you need to be translatable. So to do that, this one particular screen, if you need to do it in Drupal 7, it would take a hell lot of time, because you need to go back to each of the content type and each of the taxonomy and then enable, come back, fields, enable, and so on. It's like exponential clicks. So this is just one screen. So the moment you click on comment, you will get all the settings related to the comment. And the moment you click on the content, you will get all the fields with all the content types. And then the moment you choose the content type, you'll get all the fields within the content type. So you could choose. Yeah, this is really wonderful. So in one screen, you can configure like what all entities you want translatable. And for the content types, you can choose your site's default language. So earlier, when I was talking about changing the default language, if you actually change the default language, this functionality would change. So there you could actually choose to have a specific language and not change the default language, because that is a particular use case. And you could also choose whether to show the user to select the language, or you can let them create the content only in the default language. So everything in one single screen. Yeah. And easier RTL styling. So as we discussed, language settings include RTL or LTR orientation per language. So in the language edit page, you have seen that name, language code, and you need to choose whether it's RTL or LTR, left to right or right to left. So Drupal 8 provides clean support for right to left languages as well. Picking from the first screen, you have seen that. So in D7, for any CSS file, for the RTL counterparts, you need to write a file -rtl.css. So if you have a style.css file, if you need equivalent right to left styles, you need to have style-rtl.css. So you need to like refer two files, like what elements you are actually doing your CSS. So now RTL is all integrated in actual CSS. You can use attribute selectors like dr is equals to RTL. So in one single CSS file, if you are writing a CSS code for a particular block, just below that you can have your RTL styles as well. This you have seen. And language visibility and filtering. Block visibility. So in Drupal 8, it extends visibility settings for language. So whenever you are creating or editing a block, configuring a block, you can choose in which language that block has to be visible. If you don't select any language, it will be by default visible in all the languages, but you can choose which language this particular block has to be visible. For example, if you have a menu, you are creating a menu and you need different menu for different languages. So you just create a block for each of the languages and enable them in that particular language. So each block will be only visible to that particular language. You have a different menu for each different language. Yeah. And
that's good for like advertisements and things like that you can have this like targeting different languages.
Yeah, for anything. Yeah, for any block you could just choose language. So you could have one block for Spanish and another for English. And as I said, Drupal allows you to configure separate language negotiation method for content. So the rules how the language is chosen. So you don't have to use the same interface language, interface translation rules for the detection of the language. So this is the block configure page. If you actually see, there's a new setting called language. So you could just choose which language you want this particular block to be visible.
Is that obvious on the block config page then? Because it's just let's say, so you don't have to like name each one, you know, Spanish menu, English menu. It's obvious when you get to the list of blocks, which.
No, I mean, like if you need, that's like, okay, like if you have a block, for example, let's say menu by default, it will be available in all the languages. It will display in all the languages. But if you need that in only in that particular language, like I need 4 links in my English site and I need only 3 or different links altogether, then you could actually choose that this block will be visible only to that particular language.
Right, then if you're looking at like the configuration things of list on blocks.
Yes.
Is it gonna, you have to name it like, you know, menu Spanish, menu English, so you can tell, or does it automatically?
Okay, so that's your block name, I think. So it's what you give the name to the block. At the end of the day, it's just a block with option where you can actually choose in which language it can be displayed. Yes. They're entities.
So you could probably make your own dot UI. You should try it. It might be awesome.
Yeah. So and you can also have language filtering in views as well. So while you are creating your views, and you can filter your content by language as well, and you can expose language filter to the users as well. So you can have a list of content and allow users to choose the language. And transliteration in core. So Drupal now comes with a powerful transliteration system. By default, it uses to translate machine name generation. So if you're creating a content type and you are actually giving a name like something like this in a different language, the default transliteration system will transliterate that particular names for the machine names. You can extend this transliteration if you need for any other purpose as well. So earlier, if you need a transliteration, you need to add additional contrib module. And yeah, deployment friendly automated downloads. So I was talking about the translations can be deployable easily. So as you know, the translations are downloaded automatically and automated updates from the community. As I told, if there are any updates to translations, they are also automated as well. And you can actually configure the frequency or the source and overrides. Everything can be configurable. Like you could actually choose a complete different source for your translations rather than the D.O translation. So if you have another source, you could actually give that and it'll still pull.
These automated updates, do you get flagged as the admin that?
Actually, on a cron, if you actually set the frequency, let us say my frequency is weekly once. So whenever the cron is run every week, so those updated translations are downloaded. Yeah.
Where will the downloaded translations store?
Yeah, they'll be stored in one particular language. I'll come to that. So that, yeah, that's how you can actually deploy those.
You have to give permission to the location where they will be stored.
Yes, obviously. So all the retrieved files are stored in one central directory. So for the deployable translations, what you can do is you can have enable the dev environment to have the translation updates. So your dev environment can actually download all the translations from Drupal.org. And you can actually disable the automatic translations from your staging or your production. And you could test your automated downloaded translations. You could choose when the system is automatically downloading the translations, you can choose how those translations affect. Let us say if I have a word which is custom translated, which means the user has actually translated it to something else. You could choose when the automatic translation happens, whether those custom translations should be overridden or not. I mean, let's say today there's no translation for one particular text or word. You do the translation in your system. So that's a custom translation. Drupal 8 tracks those translations, and you can configure whether those can be overridden or not while the automatic translations happen. Downloads.
I've been in environments where DevOps turns off FTP.
Okay.
And does cron job rely on FTP? I'm assuming it does.
Okay.
Then the automatic.
Okay, this actually downloads from Drupal.org. So if Drupal.org is blocked, it will not work. But it has nothing to do with your own FTP. But it will download from Drupal.org's translations.
So is that something you could just do manually? Like push it up from stage?
Yes, exactly. So once you have your dev environment with automatic translations downloaded, you could actually check from the front end, and if everything is okay, you could just commit that folder and then import from that folder in the live environment or staging environment. Because so that your staging is not overridden automatically. So yeah, this directory can be put under version control. Yes. So these are the configurations I was talking about. Check for updates. So you could choose to never check for updates, or you could choose weekly or monthly. And source translation source, you could choose Drupal, or you could give local files only. So in the live environment, you could have local files and give that particular directory where we have committed from the Git repository. And yeah, import behavior. So if you actually see the options in the import behavior, these are important. Don't override existing translations. So if you already have translations, you could choose not to override them. Or if you think if the community accepted translations are better, you can let override the manual translations and so on. And context specific translation APIs. So no more get underscore T and ST functions. So in D7, the T function can be used only after DB was set up. So if it was before that, you need to use the ST function. So during the installation step, for example, so you need to use the ST function for the translations. So for example, if you consider the initial screens where we saw the Arabic, so in D7 you need to use the ST function. So otherwise, you need to always, if you're not sure whether the DB is up or not, and you need to still use the translation function, then you need to use get underscore T function to get the right callback and then use that. So in Drupal 8, this is handled within T. So you could just go ahead and use T. So that will actually handle these things. And yeah, context in Drupal.T and Drupal.format plural. So in D7, T and format plural could take context, but this context can actually help the translators. So like we were talking about that particular sentence, or if there's a particular word, you could actually give context so that a single word can have two different translations in some different contexts. And this is now extended to their JavaScript counterpart as well. Drupal.T and similarly in the twig. So it's no longer a PHP template, so we can't use the T function directly, but it's still possible with T and trans blocks. I'm not really very good with twig. Yeah, basically. It's similar to T, basically. It's just syntax is different. And the important part is the plural. So that's how you actually have the singular and plurals. I think I have a screen with how if there is a singular and plural screen words, like how the interface will look. Okay. So string customizations tagged. So I was telling that customizations are actually tagged. So if there is a translation or existing translation and you manually customize the strings, those are all tagged. So when you export, you can choose include non-customized translations, include customized, include untranslated text. So when you are exporting your translations, you can choose which one to export. So you can specifically choose, like, the manual translations if you want, like what are the, so in one step you can get all the manual translations that are done in one system. So if you need to cross verify, you can just do that. So there is a clear differentiation between the manually customized strings and which are actually translated by Drupal. Same. So while importing, you can choose how those translations will affect. So whether you want to treat the imported strings as a custom translations or override non-customized translations only, or everything. So this is useful when you have a translator, like when you get all the translations in one single PO file or something and you want to import, you can choose this as a treat imported strings as custom translations. Yeah, please.
Is that at all like what the string overrides module does? Or is this just strictly for translations?
No, actually, it also, I'll come back to that as well. The string overrides module here the English itself is translatable. So if you need to do something like that, for example, let's say there's a login, right? We use sign in and login, two different words for the same action. So if let's say Drupal comes with sign in and you want login, so you can, all you need to do is edit English and make it translatable and then translate sign in to login.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had heard that there was a chance that was going to sneak in, and I wasn't sure if it had.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's nice.
We don't need string overrides anymore.
Right?
Yeah.
One last one.
Yeah. So your question was my next slide. So translatable English. Enable interface translation to English. So improve translation UI. So other than the centralized screen, this is another thing which I like very much. So this is the translation UI. So earlier in Drupal 7, if you need to translate any strings, you need to go search for the string, click, and then go to another screen. And for one particular string, you will have like all the available languages. But in general, if there's a translator, he'll be well versed with one language, like from English to Spanish or one particular language. But he'll definitely, I don't think there'll be anybody like who is like great at all the languages. Like that's a rare case. And the interface was really, really bad. And I could never actually demo that part to the client. It was like, if I need to go to the client with a multilingual site with that interface, I was like, okay, this is something I should skip smoothly, or send them screenshots or something like that. It was so horrible, like no client would accept it. Especially the editors and translators, they'll kill you. And this is the best part, like, so if you actually see, you can actually choose one particular language and you can see all the strings and you don't need to even click. So you have the translations for the translations, you could just enter in the same screen and then submit. And I was talking about singular and plurals, so you could see the context here. So 1 second, at count second. So if it is a plural, how it has to be translated. So that particular sentence will appear something like this. So then based on the sentence, the translator will actually change the wording for that particular language. Okay, and content and configuration translations. D7 provides translation capabilities for nodes, but no other content or configuration. So if you wanted to translate blocks, terms, or menus, you couldn't do with D7. You had to get additional D7 contributed modules. So obviously complicated solutions by contributed modules. So X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah modules. You need to download all types of modules, like I think around 24 modules at least. And that's done by just 4 modules in the end. Yeah, so, and the best part is in Drupal 7, other than a node, for all the entities, there is no support in core. Even if those contributed modules provide you a solution, they'll come up with a custom solution. They will define their own solution. It's not something which they're extending core itself. But Drupal 8 has a base solution in core for all the entities. So yeah, mostly we work with either configuration or content, which are all entities. And content entities almost all have fields in Drupal 8. So fields come with native support for multilingual storage, editing, and rendering. So if you enable multilingual support for any fields, D8 has a support for everything. So based on the configurations, it will create the edit screens and everything. So it's not that the moment you enable, there's no new solutions which are like not in core. So every piece of content is now translatable. No need for specialized systems and glue modules. Okay. And configuration translations. A config system has full support for language overrides, and all values stored in configuration may have a language variance. So generally configurations are stored in YAML files. By default, if you don't have a language, the default files will be used. If you have a language variance, so a copy of that file will be created for those which have the language variance for the configurations. And context access system lets you load values with specific language overrides. So if you want to load some configurations in particular language, you can do that. Yeah, those overrides are fully deployment friendly. So all this is stored in files. So they could be in Git. And default shipped configuration is translatable. So when Drupal 8 comes with some default configurations, though they are translatable as well. Example, default views, content types, fields, etc. And so as I was telling, the configuration translation module just provides the user interface for the actual solution provided by the base language module. So the heavy lifting is actually done by the language module. The configuration translation module just provides you UI for all these configurations. So if you actually go to the configuration translation screen, this is how it will look. So you could list into each of the systems. If you go to the block, you will see all the translation configuration translations that are available and which can be translatable.
So, as an example, if I wanted to make something as simple as an HTML title tag, and I want to assure that it's in Spanish, like.
Okay. The best example can be your site name.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a configuration, right?
Right.
So that can be translatable. So I could actually show you the screen quickly if I have time. Okay, I think we still have time, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is our configuration translation. We're almost done. Yeah. So the difference, I was talking about configuration translations and content translation. So what are configurations and what are content? Generally, we get very confused. So nodes, users, commands, terms, menu items. So which are actually created by the user or editor for that matter is content. The configurations are something which are actually done by the admin or site admin who actually changes the structure of the site. So views, vocabularies, which actually defines the taxonomy, and contact categories, fields, all these are configurations. And yeah, so as I told earlier, so the configurations are stored in YAML files. So this is the default YAML file for the system information. So when you generally go to the system information file, you will see name of your site, the site email, site slogan, what is the home page. So this is how it is stored. This is the default page that comes with Drupal 8. When you actually create a site, this is copied into your default language and these elements are filled. It's similar to what settings.php does. So you actually copy your default.settings.php to settings.php, right? It's exactly similar. Copied and modified. Source is not modified. Yes. Yeah. So no copies of files for each language. So it's the configuration files are copied for only the elements which has the language variants. Just because you have a language, it's not copied. Only if that particular configuration has a language variance, then it's copied and you will have a copy like this.
So it's one file per language.
Sorry?
It's going to be one file per language.
Yeah, only if you have a language variance for that configuration. For example, for the system information page, if you don't have any translated configurations, if you have same site name and everything for all the languages, you will not have different files. Yeah. So you can find the slides here, bit.ly/d8-multilingual. And obviously, most of the content is from Gaber's blog. So I provided a link to that as well. You can also look at Drupal8multilingual.org.
So just later, after all your configurations, the editor comes in to edit an article that you put 3 languages on the site. They see tabs across the top.
Yes, right. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's my Twitter handle, Chakri_IITH. Thank you. You could quickly go to simplytest.me and actually try it out. Within next 10 minutes, you could actually try your Drupal 8 multilingual site. That's the best place to test. So you don't need to install too many things. Just go there. Let me just quickly do something.
Does that still have like a 15-minute session?
Yeah, let's consider this as a Q&A and continue.
If you sign in, you get your test site for 3 hours.
Yeah, right.
Oh, is it?
Oh, is it?
Nice.
Oh, yeah. It says 23. Okay, I unnecessarily closed my test site in that case. I thought it's 3 hours. Earlier it used to
You
be.
know what? I think you're right. I think they made it 24. So
Yeah.
it would be on the try Drupal page.
Oh,
It's on the
nice.
homepage now. And it works on your phone.
Perfect, yeah. Thank you.
So is there, like, in your experience, is there anything that it's lacking? Or do you think it's pretty much covered all the use cases?
Actually, compared to the earlier versions, I'm really happy. I have worked on a lot of multilingual sites in Drupal 7 and 6, and like this is awesome. Like even the effort for the developer and the ease for the customer is like the best so far. Almost all the use cases are covered. All the issues, the troubles which we faced with the previous versions are covered.
So,
I mean,
so what
the-
did you say? You said the ease for the developer end.
The clients who, I mean, the translation, I was referring to the translation interface. Yeah. So if you actually build a multilingual site and give it to the client, at the end of the day, they'll go to a translator and they can't. I mean, you had to just get the translations in a PO file and a developer has to import earlier. The interface was really not useful.
But now it's
Yeah, now it's all one screen. All you need to do is like probably 2 screenshots or 2-minute demo and he'll be through.
How soon do you think we would be ready for shifting migrating a Drupal 7 multilingual site to a Drupal 8?
Oh, that's a tough question.
now in the next week.
That's what you want.
To start developing a project that could launch in a few months, 6 months. As soon as the